Good morning. Today is Wednesday, May 22. Continuation of our regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners. And just want to say that we added an additional item after our work session that we're about to commence. And that will be that Ms. Jones will make a rare but important appearance at our board meeting to discuss our evening public comment sessions that we were discussing last night, and also the board retreat dates. Without further ado, I'd like to now move to item 1A, our work session and discussion on the Willamette Confluence Preserve Transfer Questionnaire. And with us to introduce all the people here at the table is Brett Henry, the Lane County Parks Division Manager. And if you could just introduce everybody around the table for us, and then starting on your presentation.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning. I'm here with several partners who have expressed interest in assisting county parks in various roles and capacities should the county one day become the owner of the Willamette Confluence Preserve. With us today is Chris Orsinger with Friends of Buford Park in Mount Pisgah, Brad Van Apple with the Mount Pisgah Arboretum. We have Joe Mole and Daniel Dietz. They're with the McKenzie River Trust. The State Parks Division of OPRD has also pledged a letter of support that is contained as an attachment to the agenda. I speak for all partners in saying that we all agree that the Confluence Preserve is an important legacy project for a future landowner, and we are all committed to preserving this valuable natural area within the greater Mount Pisgah area. Ed Alverson, who is our Natural Areas Coordinator for Lane County Parks, will give a presentation of the history of the property, the role the Nature Conservancy has played as a landowner since 2010, and how ownership of the Confluence Preserve reflects the county's strategic plan and the recently adopted Park System Master Plan goals. With the support of the County Commissioners, Parks is interested in submitting a non-binding questionnaire prior to June 15th. This is the first of two work sessions, as we have a follow-up session scheduled for the second week of June prior to the due date of the questionnaire. After Ed's presentation, Chris Orsinger, Brad Van Apple, and Joe Mole are prepared to talk about their role as project partners. So without further ado, Ed Alverson will kick off the discussion with a presentation of the Willamette Confluence Preserve.
Morning, everyone. I have a brief presentation. It's kind of an overview of the information that's in the memo that we prepared. So hopefully it'll all make sense and this will all come together for you. Just start to orient you with the geographic context of the Willamette Confluence. And this is an aerial view looking east. The confluence of the Coast Fork and the Middle Fork are in the middle of the photo. And you can see Mount Pisgah in the background on the right. So it's the site that we're talking about is a large area of river frontage along the Middle Fork and the Coast Fork. I'll have a map in a few slides. But I wanted to kind of give you a sense of the history of this project and really how, what the vision for park and public open space at Mount Pisgah was, going back almost 50 years. So this is a map from the Central Lane Parks Plan that was prepared in 1970, and it was really the first visionary parks planning document for our region. And the vision for Mount Pisgah was a 3,500 acre park that included basically all of the land between the Middle Fork and the Coast Fork, including Mount Pisgah and also the bottomland areas in the floodplain between the two rivers. And I'll just read a little bit of an excerpt from the 1970 Central Lane Parks Plan. The largest hill park in the Central Lane region would be the proposed 3,540 acre Mount Pisgah State Park. Mount Pisgah lies at the confluence of the coast and middle forks of the Willamette River. It is a major visual feature in the upper Willamette Valley and offers a wide panoramic views from its slopes and crest. The proposed Mount Pisgah State Park site enjoys 6 miles of riverfront, a varied and interesting range of vegetation, and a variety of landforms. So local leaders really, thought this was an important site to have in public ownership. The state initially had other ideas. And so it was the local leaders who really convinced Tom McCall, who's in the photo there, to include the Mount Pisgah area and the Confluence area as a state park site. And the funding for acquisition of what is now Howard Buford Recreation Area came from federal funds, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that money was passed through to the state. So the state purchased the land that's part of the 2,214 acre Howard Buford Recreation Area, but there weren't sufficient funds at that time to acquire the entire 3,500 acres. So that's how we kind of got to where things were about 10 years ago. Let's go through the timeline here. In the early 70s, Howard Buford Recreation Area was established with land acquisitions based on the present boundaries. The initial arrangement actually was state ownership of the land and then a lease agreement with Lane County Parks. So Lane County Parks has always been the manager of the park, but didn't actually own the property until 1980. In 2006, the Wildlish Land Company approached Lane County about purchasing the property that they still owned along the Middle Fork, between the Middle Fork and the Coast Fork. At that time, Lane County asked the Nature Conservancy to take the lead role in negotiating with Wildlish and finding funding to acquire the property. And included in the packet is a board memo from 2007, I believe, that kind of summarizes that point in time and provides some background for you as to what the county's role was at that time. So in 2010, Nature Conservancy was able to find the funding and acquire the property from the Wildlish Land Company. Their stated intent at that time was to really focus on doing habitat restoration on the property. And then once the restoration was done, transfer the property over to another owner. So they anticipated it to take about 10 years to accomplish the habitat restoration. And so now we're 9 years later and they're looking at the next step. Here's a map, and this is actually from before the property had been acquired, but you can see the area labeled Wildlish Land Company on the north side of Howard Buford Recreation Area. And then you can also see the other colored polygons which represent other public ownerships. And in particular, Willamette Lane Parks and Recreation District on the north side of the Middle Fork, and several state parks parcels that are identified in purple. So that's the context, and you can see how the Willamette Confluence Preserve is really central to everything. It's really in the center of what's going on in this greater Mount Pisgah Willamette Confluence area. Now I should also mention that as a part of the funding that came to the Nature Conservancy for acquiring the Willamette Confluence Preserve, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, OWEB, and the Bonneville Power Administration through their Wildlife Mitigation Program, they hold conservation easements, perpetual conservation easements on the property. And their interest is in maintaining the habitat values. The technical term is conservation values in perpetuity. Talk a little bit about the habitat restoration that Nature Conservancy has accomplished over the last decade or so. Both upland habitat restoration focused on the oak savanna habitats, and then also floodplain restoration, focused particularly on the old gravel ponds and improving the habitat conditions associated with the gravel ponds. In some cases, actually removing some of the barriers between the waterways and the ponds to create greater ecological interchange with the ponds. And so this is looking east up the Middle Fork, and you can see how the former levees along the river in some places have been breached. So it's really amazing to go out there and walk around today and see what the site looks like after all the restoration that's been done. I believe it's about $7 million worth of habitat restoration work. Talk a little bit more detail about the transfer timeline, and as I said, when the Nature Conservancy purchased the property in 2010, they said that they would own the property for the time that it took to complete the habitat restoration. The Nature Conservancy did prepare a management plan to guide the restoration. That was in 2012. And the restoration is on track to be completed by 2020. This ownership questionnaire that Brett mentioned is due to the Nature Conservancy on June 15th. And they're looking at a timeline where they will make a decision on who transfer the property to by the end of October this year. But then, assuming that it'll take more than a year to actually complete the transfer process. This is kind of the timeline as the Nature Conservancy has outlined it. Move into talking about some of the policy connections here. How does this particular property fit into Lane County's priorities and Lane County Parks goals? And we feel that this project definitely fits into two of the three Lane County strategic priorities, and probably all three really, but particularly vibrant communities and enhancing the livability of the local community, and also robust infrastructure related to implementing the Parks Master Plan. Going back a bit, there is this history of policy documents and other planning documents that relate to this site. I mentioned the Central Lane Parks Plan from 1970. The Rivers to Ridges Open Space Study identified this area as a potential open space anchor. That was in 2003, so it was before Wildlish approached the county about selling the property. And then also I should highlight in that board memo from 2007, there was a statement there that indicated that acquisition of the Wildlish property would be consistent with a variety of parks and open space plans and policies for Lane County and for the state of Oregon. So just mention that because that was kind of what came out when the county was previously looking at this site. Talk a little bit about more about the Lane County Parks Master Plan, which was adopted in December 2018. It does have a specific strategy to evaluate options to acquire the Willamette Confluence Preserve in Chapter 5. But also, we feel that acquisition of this property would meet at least 4 of the master plan goals. Collaborating, and that really relates to the partnerships that we have here. Connecting, protecting resources, and reflecting our values. As Brett mentioned, we have a number of stewardship partners at the table, and also additional ones that are associated particularly with the Rivers to Ridges Partnership. So it's a really great partnership context for moving forward with a project like this. And then, as outlined in the memo, there are really 2 different scenarios that we're presenting to you for your consideration. Scenario 1 would be that Lane County Parks would apply for permanent ownership of the Willamette Confluence Preserve, and then preserve management would be accomplished by a team of partners with Lane County Parks in the lead role. Scenario 2 is that Mackenzie River Trust would apply for ownership, and preserve management would also be accomplished by a team of partners, but with Mackenzie River Trust in the lead role, and Lane County Parks would still be involved, but as a partner. So that's all the presentation that I have. So I think we have a few minutes for comments from others at the table.
Yeah. Chris, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having us here, Commissioners. It's a really notable moment, I think, for this project that has really been 50 years in development since 1970. This is a legacy and an approach that's been a partnership of many land-owning agencies like Oregon State Parks, Willamette Lane Parks District, and Lane County, as well as Bonneville Power Administration, which owns some land, and the Friends of Beaufort Park, which purchased Turtle Flats in 2015 to facilitate further restoration of the rivers there. But it's not only does it connect to the 3 policy goals that were addressed here, but these are basic needs for our community. Clean drinking water. Across the river from that restoration site is the drinking water for 40% of Springfield Utilities Board's drinking water supply. but also for recreation, clean water for people to recreate in and swim in and boat. This is part of who we are as a culture. And also our salmon need that clean water, and we're enhancing salmon habitat in this reach of the river. Open space for recreation is part of our green infrastructure. We think of roads, of course, and buildings and sewage systems and whatnot, and we need that river to be able to survive what we do to it. And we have done so much in the last century for the Willamette River when it was truly referred to by the public as a sewer system for the Willamette Valley. Most notably in Portland, but all along the Willamette Valley, where cities were dumping untreated sewage into the water. So the way we've changed in 100 years reflects our value for stewardship of our water resources, of our natural resources. And here we're taking it to the next level against the efforts of, against the reality that we have a warming climate that is further impacting our ability to keep our salmon alive. So the 5,000 acre property, the combination of all these lands with this wild heartland that is the Willamette Confluence Preserve, this is basically a, it's like our central park that's going to contribute to the livability of this community for future generations, as it does now. The public appreciation and support for this is so deep and wide, and it is only mildly expressed in the over 1,000 volunteers between the Arboretum and the Friends that we mobilize to try to bring that love into action. And with every ounce of sweat and every hour of labor that those volunteers put into the land to help Lane County care for it, because we don't have the funding to pay people to do all this work, that's connecting the people to this land and connecting them to the culture of stewardship that we're trying to grow. That is the only way forward as a human society to live through the climate change and the growing population that this community and the Willamette Valley will see. So I feel very passionately about this, obviously, and I've worked on it for many years, and it's to me a very important moment to bring this question to you of how will the community care for this land? Not just Mount Pisgah, but the whole complex of lands, which is such a fantastic opportunity for the public. And here the answer is simply the partnerships, the public-private partnerships. However the details get worked out, whether Mackenzie River Trust is bringing their expertise in this matter as realty, or the Arboretum with their strength in education and connecting people to the land, or our expertise in managing stewardships, managing habitat projects. We see a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for the community, and I think my last remark would be that the key to success over the long haul is not just funding, which we'll need more funding to take care of these lands, but we will need to create the appropriate level of public access that protects the conservation values as intended and the conservation easements, but further connects people over generations to that land, to that practice of conservation, to that role of being part of taking care of the land. That will have ripple effects to the rest of their lives and to the rest of the lands in our county. And so with that, I would just encourage you from our board that, one, we hope that you will act favorably toward preserving this and making it somehow work out, and that the Friends will serve, as we have for the last 30 years, in a support role, bringing our resources of stewardship, habitat expertise, and grant writing and community fundraising. We're about $1 million organization, and working closely with the Arboretum, we're ready to continue to support and grow the community of support for these efforts at Mount Pisgah.
Thank you, Chris. Brad, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, commissioners. The Arboretum has been a partner with Lane County at Harborview for recreation in the area since 1973, since it became a park. And it's a partnership that has worked out amazingly well. We've spent 46 years helping to restore habitat and maintain and build trails, and mostly do a lot of public education for people of all ages, children and adults. We're excited to see the potential realization of the original vision for this, and I think it'd be quite a legacy to pass on, have this amazing jewel, the central park of the Eugene Springfield area, in county ownership or Mackenzie River Trust ownership as long as it is taken care of. The conservation easements for OWEB and BPA both recognize the value of education as part of the management plan for this area, and that's an area where the Arboretum has expertise. That's where our main focus is. And so we see ourselves helping out in a lot of ways. We do a lot of partnership with the Friends, and Chris mentioned, fundraising and engaging volunteers and getting the public involved in caring for this land. That's all things that we can do, that we can help out with. But we would also be to try to take a leadership role in writing the education portion of the management plan and helping to see it implemented. So I think this vibrant ecosystems in that area just provide such an amazing opportunity for education at a different level, and we would be very excited to be a part of that and continue with it. I want to mention that at this point, completing the survey and submitting it is a non-binding thing. If you don't submit it by June 15th, then the county has forfeited the opportunity to be considered for ownership of that land. If you do submit it, you haven't signed on the dotted line. There's no commitment made there. There's still opportunities for things to go a different way. One of the things I didn't hear mentioned was the funds that the Nature Conservancy will be passing along. I think everyone's familiar with the fact that they're not asking for money for this. They're going to hand it over, and currently hand over $1 million worth of maintenance funding for it as well. So, that's a nice launching pad for developing the resources needed to maintain this land and open it up for appropriate recreation and engage the community with it going down. So we'd love to see the original vision realized, and we'd love to play a part of it in it moving forward.
Thanks, Brad. We appreciate your support. Joe?
Good morning again. Thanks for inviting us all here. Clearly, as Chris noted, it's a pretty neat opportunity, to say the least, that we've got in front of us. Why is the Mackenzie River Trust here? Well, I think it's clear that all of us that manage land recognize that it takes money to manage land. And one of the biggest changes that's occurred since the Tom McCall days is what's happened with salmon, what's happened with a lot of listed fish and wildlife species that led to the $23 million funding that BPA and then OWEB brought into this, with the expectation that this is a natural area that needs to address some of those losses. So from a real estate perspective, this land is encumbered. There are restrictions on what we can all do out there, and we've all learned to work within this changing world. Yesterday when we were out on site, one of the other staff echoed what Chris said, that what we really need here is a community to accept this as a cultural change, that it's not a golf course kind of recreation area that we're looking at the confluence. This is a natural area. And what does it take to interact, to recreate, to be in that place, and yet still respect the habitat conservation values that are out there? So we are all learning by working closely together. I hope you're aware of the degree to which Ed and other staff at the Mackenzie River Trust and the councils are working on places like Keppel Vickery Park, Highland Landing, Howard G. Morton Park up to Mackenzie, where you've got land that we own or private landowners own abutting county property, and fences and things not being respected by wildlife, and the issues, weeds and other things. And so this collective network, collaborative approach to things is really what we're all leaning into. The Mackenzie River Trust role as a land-owning, nonprofit land trust is pretty straightforward. We have that experience with BPA and OWEB, so if the county isn't able to come forward and assume the responsibility and the liabilities associated, as you know well, with land ownership and that extra layer with the conservation easements, we stand ready to do that. I think regardless of ownership, the approach to long-term and the vision for this place really is the same. It's the same people at the table bringing the same mix of resources. I think ownership does change, whether or not we own it for near-term or long-term, or the county immediately takes ownership. It does change some of the strategies we want to take to secure long-term funding, whether from something like a bond measure or from private donors or from corporate donors or those sorts of things. That's something we all need to explore a little more deeply, is how the different publics would respond to that request for support for this. I think that's probably one of the biggest linchpins that we all really need to look at. TNC is happy to transfer it, I think, because once they're done, that's a big, it's a great victory, but it's also, quite frankly, a long-term management liability on all of us. The flip side of everything that we do on behalf of public values and public trust. So we appreciate the opportunity that we've had to work closely with Brett and the rest of the staff, and obviously the rest of the partners. There are a lot of people excited about this and eyes wide open about all of the challenges that come with it. So I look forward to the degree that you all want to dig into this today and in the coming month. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful presentation, and thank you to our partners, too, for coming and giving your perspective on it. I was hoping that the Board of Commissioners would have a little discussion and questions of any of you, and I'll just kind of kick that off by saying the Nature Conservancy national organization that helps bridge the partnerships that are out there between people that want to sell land with high natural qualities to governments typically, but also land trusts and other people. And in order to step in and do that, they provide this bridge function. And we could not be doing this at all without the Nature Conservancy and their stepping in here. They've done this all over the West, in fact, all over the United States, and maybe even worldwide, I don't know. I'm seeing a head nod there. So I knew that they had worked throughout the United States, and I've worked with them on other projects, in here in Lane County. And so, number one, we just need to recognize that we wouldn't even be really talking about this and if they hadn't stepped in. So we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. Secondly, I think that I'd like to just kick it off by asking a question, and that is, Lane County Parks has a kind of recreational park history, camping, hiking, and Mackenzie River Trust really is primarily a habitat protection trust, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to hear from either of you or both of you on the topic of how do we make sure this, to the extent that these BPA easements allow recreation, how we're able to put in recreation as we move forward.
I'll answer that first. And so, from my perspective, I think it's important that the preserve be managed differently than HBRA. They are somewhat analogous, there are some similarities there, but with, as you said, the conservation easements that are on the property and the habitat values, I think it needs to be clear, not only to us as a staff, but to the public, that this is a nature preserve. So there's going to be there's a smaller carrying capacity versus HBRA. HBRA has over 400,000 visitors a year. We don't want that kind of footprint on this property, so we'll take measures to limit the amount of recreation at the site. And so I think we really need to do a good job of putting some signage up there to show that, if we're not going to allow vehicular access, that this is a nature preserve, and educate the people the value of that. So I see this as just a different kind of management approach than what we typically do, but I think it's something that we're certainly capable of.
Okay. And Joe, how would you respond to this?
Pretty similar, a perfect example of regardless of who owns it, I think the challenges that we face are very similar. I asked Ed to bring this back up. The confluence of the Mackenzie and the Willamette rivers, where we own Green Island, and here the confluence of these two rivers, despite having dams upstream, they're still pretty dynamic areas. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have revetments and things that went in 50, 60 years ago, but most of them are starting to fail. It's a major problem for the whole Willamette Basin. And we're going to continue, especially with these flashy flood systems that we're seeing in response to climate change. We're going to start to see even what we saw this year, where the high water has really, this is an older photo, but you would see on the left that gravel bar in the upper end of the main part of the river is much more extensive, and there's all sorts of big root wads and things out there. TNC did sort of a safe halfway restoration. They left this long berm in part because subs water intake
Intake.
is over on that far side. All of this leads to, this isn't a particularly accessible site currently. And I don't think it would be in anybody's best interest to actively facilitate recreational access to all points. And so I think in some ways the site lends itself to continue to use the recreational access point that you have with Howard Buford. And then it's going to be a question of, well, it's walk-in access only, or maybe it's bicycle access only, or maybe there's some areas where you even remove more. There's more connection between ponds that just makes it less accessible. Obviously, we have real access history from the old Bring site and Glass Bar Island with the state that we're going to need to work with. That we know that there's great interest in the Middle Fork path on the left there, crossing over with a bridge. That would be a pretty neat thing, quite frankly. But again, if you could do that towards the recreation area currently, so that again disperses some of that pressure, I think there's a chance to do it. One of the things we really have to think about from a investment perspective is, I think it's quite likely that over the next 30 to 50 years, this area is going to get wrecked by some major floods, and we don't want to put in too much hard infrastructure that we would be smacking ourselves in the forehead about because it's getting moved around. It's a reality that we're going to increasingly face.
One final thing before I invite commissioners, and that is, my understanding is that with all these other public agencies, such as SUB or Oregon Fish and Wildlife, Oregon Parks and Recreation, BPA, all those come to mind. None of them are in this mix. It's just Lane County Parks and Mackenzie River Trust that are answering the questionnaire. So it's not like we're competing against other governments in this respect.
No, and also we're not competing against Mackenzie River Trust.
Yes.
So, just to make it clear that with the commissioner's support, we would turn in a questionnaire. If there was not support among the commissioners, we would not, and then
Okay.
the so-called backup plan would be Mackenzie River
Yeah,
Trust.
well, I think,
It's also worth mentioning that the city of Eugene and Willamette Lane have been involved in these conversations, and both organizations have said they're not interested in being the Willamette.
Oh, okay.
We have cast the net fairly bluntly, I think.
I think it is very important that we put in answers to these questions. Other commissioners want to ask questions? Commissioner Buck?
Well, I took a tour, thank you, Chris, so I got most of my questions asked at that point, but just in remarks to fellow commissioners and everybody at the table, it's like, this is a true gem of land in our community, and I feel strongly that we should put in a questionnaire at the very least. But this area, I mean, when do we as the county ever get the opportunity to acquire this much land and basically not have to pay for it? I mean, this is I mean, we'll have to talk about long-term maintenance costs clearly. But this is a huge, wonderful wildlife area. And I know that we could find trails, through the already existing system for people to walk along or enjoy and talk about different areas of connection through the whole entire system of recreation in our community. So I just want to at least put that out there that this has my support.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. Well, duh. I mean, that's great. And you asked a question, how often do we get land basically no charge? Well, twice this month, I think, right?
Not like this, though.
And I'm looking right at you, Brett, so on your watch twice this month. But really, this is a very special piece. I first, I toured it years ago when Bring was out there, there's not much to tour back then other than trying to find an old sash window. But in 2012, I went on a tour, and I'm pretty sure you led the tour. There was a large group of us, and we're looking at the levees and the ponds and describing where it was going to be breached and where the flow would be. And I was thinking, what a great vision this is, because it's kind of stagnant. A lot of Japanese knotweed in there, and different things. And I could, the way it was described at that point, I could envision it, but having been there recently, I couldn't really agree with what has happened since then. Because once you introduce fresh water, is how quickly things change, how quickly things go back to, not to natural, but they have the vestiges of the natural, the way it would have looked. That being said, we are where we are today, and the next step forward, of course, I'm in favor of the acquisition, of the petition. But there's something that you said, Chris, that really stands out. You said this notable moment for the project that's been in process for nearly 50 years. Nearly 50 years. And Brad, you said 47, it's less than 50 years, I guess.
Yeah.
The other thing is that to create the correct level of public access, you said the correct level of public access, and to generate in people the role of being a part of protecting the land, so that everybody, we all own it. So give people the ownership and allow people to take the ownership. And it becomes, once something becomes yours, then you want to take care of it. And what you're doing is you're giving a pathway for complete public ownership where people can have, the correct level, the correct level of public access, whether it's from the river, from the land, wherever it may be. So this is wonderful. If for folks who haven't been there to experience what has happened in the last 6.5, 7 years is miraculous. And I see miracles on the horizon. So thanks for this presentation. On a day that started out gloomy, you introduced a ray of sunshine. Thank you.
Commissioner Bernie,
It's still pretty gloomy for me, but we'll get there.
It was a ray of sunshine.
I'm not arguing that there's a ray of sunshine. This is going to seem really basic because it's fascinating for me. I really resonate both personally, professionally, my entire life with everything that you said and felt. So it's always interesting to hear how complicated it is to do the right thing. Questions, baseline questions. I'm assuming that by the commissioners agreeing to move forward with putting out or answering non-binding questions, that just keeps the option alive, right? That's what I'm gleaning for the county to, okay. Many people have referenced costs, like what are we looking at? What does that specifically mean, entail, obligate, make liable? Because I haven't heard that, and I would really like to understand that as we try to do the right thing here.
Yeah, so TNC has estimated $100,000 a year in maintenance, so this is mostly stewardship type of maintenance. Fortunately, we have the Friends of Beaufort Park in Mount Pisgah, who has pledged their support to assist with that. As was mentioned earlier, there's a $1 million endowment that could go towards operation and maintenance as well. So that's a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier, there would be very limited access, so there would be very limited development at the site. And so we don't see there being a large cost in terms of maintenance for that site.
And I would, just a couple more questions. Thanks. I presume, but I don't know, that Mackenzie River Trust in Lane County, no matter which entity takes lead on this, would be working hand in glove and supporting one another. Please.
Absolutely. Again, I think that pointing out the presence, the long-term presence of Friends in the Arboretum especially, who know the area, work in the area actively already. And when we work collectively, it's a question of, well, who can do the work and how can we get the money collectively? It's
Right.
not a flag raising
And how do we
thing.
divvy it out no matter who plays lead?
Yeah, I would just add that in general, you've got two levels of care for this site. One is that baseline habitat maintenance perspective, and in general in the Willamette Valley, people are working on an estimate of about $100 to $140 per acre per year as a way to think. How much money do we need long term? You start to layer in public access, then you have public access response. You're talking about people and maybe a little bit of infrastructure. And those costs kind of estimate. And we do that by thinking, well, if we're going to hold something long term, how much money should we set aside in a bank account so that from an income generation perspective, it would kick off what we would need for that year. From a county, that's what I referred to earlier in terms of thinking about revenue models. It's a different revenue model if you've got a tax base or something like that. But there's a lot of there's good experience and good estimates available for that. I asked Ed to pull this back up. I think it's common for us to think about the particular place itself and the boundaries there, but there's a lot going on here that I think you're all aware of. I mean, just downstream, both UWeb and Sub are looking at new drinking water infrastructure potential. Downstream, you've got Glenwood and both the high development potential that's going on there, and then the complicating factor of FEMA and the National Floodplain Insurance Program and what county planning staff are having to deal with. It's an area where the integration of those things, I think, is really ripe for some really creative approaches. And I'm hopeful and encourage the commissioners to really go back to your slide of the three pillars of the strategic plan, because you really do have a great intersection here. And I think there could be some creative ways to use some of that Glenwood development pressure to perhaps generate some offsets, to generate some revenue that could go directly upstream and protect drinking water quality and protect recreational areas of the park and the natural conservation areas here. So part of having such a great big table is that there are a lot of ideas, and trying to really implement them is the charge and the opportunity.
Well, then my final thing, I'm really excited by everything I'm hearing. I'm excited by your responses
Great.
to all of our points. Last question, and that is, my wife and I and friends are finding an increasing disconnect between young people and nature. And I'm just wondering if part of this couldn't be, I heard you reference it, but couldn't be all schools in the county be coordinated with and provide opportunities for all kids in the county to visit and learn and experience this particular area.
Yeah, I think the site's got a great potential for bringing youth out there to do fishing. And so there could be an organized event where there's pre-registration for kind of a fishing derby or rodeo at the site. You know, bringing them out there, especially some of those disadvantaged kids that would like to learn how to fish. And, you know, we could have a big volunteer network working towards that. And I think it's got a lot of potential to bring out kids, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think probably Brad could speak to the youth engagement.
Yeah, we bring about 3,000 or 3,500 kids out each year on field trips at the Arboretum, and we see this as an opportunity to expand on that program.
That's great.
Bring kids into a different, really vibrant ecosystem and teach them other things and bring more kids out. We agree with you that every kid in Lane County should have an opportunity to understand nature and to get out and learn about it, and what a beautiful place to do it right out here. So.
I'd like to add that with the mosaic of ownerships, in particular Lane County Parks and the North Bottomlands, that is a natural geographic point in the landscape to create a gateway facility on the county lands. Gateway facility, I mean, obviously people need a place to park if they're driving, or park their bike if they're biking. But, you know, that can be a complement. So for the example, we could conceivably connect to the statewide measure that passed for requiring that all students in 5th grade get an outdoor experience. Well, can that be provided by a piece of the park, the existing park, and then immediately adjacent is this amazing natural area, and they could be helping learn how to pull weeds or grow native plants or plant things, you know, and there we are sequestering more carbon at a time when carbon levels are going through the roof. So I just think there's lots of opportunities to create that culture of stewardship that's part of where we need to head.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Bozovich?
Thank you. So I'll just real quick state I support us submitting a survey, so we're at least in the running. I supported everything from us turning the Turtle Flats over to the Nature Conservancy back a few years back to some of this work that's been done for the salmon restoration and connecting the ponds. You just have to look at delta ponds and see how those have changed over the years since they reconnected those to the river. like that, though, you look at the bike path as it goes north from Valley River Center, where it's elevated and railed, and you have access to look at those without putting a footprint on, other than the elevated bike path. So I would strongly I'm still very interested in that whole idea of connecting that bridge across the river, and particularly doing it as far to the east as possible, and maybe even getting on the back side of Mount Pisgah so that there could be a bike connection to, I guess it's Edmond and then Wheeler, which is some of the most prime cycling roads in Lane County in that direction, that are really difficult to get to any other way, because you end up having to ride Franklin Boulevard, then doing CV Loop, then you got to jump across, Highway 58, and parallel Highway 58 for a while, then you got to go across that bridge on Highway 58 with traffic. Yeah, and then you got to make a left turn on Highway 58 as a cyclist. None of it is fun.
Get in the picture, yeah.
Yeah. None of it is fun. So if there was some way of connecting that Willamette Lane path across there, and do it with that sort of elevated structure that is railed, so you're not encouraging people to start putting that footprint. There's access without footprint, no different than what they've done in a lot of the Delta Ponds area. So I really, long-term vision, who's going to provide funding, how's that all going to happen, that's down the road. But we've managed to do some pretty amazing things with bike ped facilities along the rivers in Eugene and Lane County as it is. So I don't think that it's an unsolvable problem. One of the most amazing river and bike ped access in the country. I always have to laugh when I think about San Antonio and their river walk, the ditch walk in comparison, When I think about, the frontage on the Willamette River that we have here in our cities is just, when I bring somebody from out of the area and walk them on those paths, they're just flabbergasted at that nature that's right in town. And this is just an extension of that. And I just see a lot of good things happening here. So I'm fully supportive of submitting the survey and continuing down that path, and continuing the work that'll just make this, Mount Pisgah already a gem, 400,000 people a year.
Yeah, maybe a little more.
Yeah, just a pretty amazing place. Another place I like to take people from out of town at sunset. Yeah. Just an amazing view from the top of that place. And the folks that you guys have all worked together in partnership, the Friends of Beaufort Park, the Arboretum, Nature Conservancy, and everybody just has made that place just an amazing gem for Lane County as far as parks, as far as tourism goes, and a great showcase. It's going to be a great showcase during the 2021 Worlds.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going back to something that you said, Chris, about ownership. Who owns this? And really, whoever wants to own it can be a part of the ownership of it. And Joe, I'm looking at you right now. You and Maddie have talked about the disconnect that kids have with nature today. And it's true, because sometimes they have to go so far to view nature. Well, you don't have to go very far. It's walking distance. You can ride a bike very, very easily out there. And Joe, what you were saying about educating kids. Chris, you were talking about fishing tournaments, getting kids out there. And it's really interesting that just yesterday we had an abbreviated presentation by MWMC, Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, which is the return to the river is just a couple miles downstream from where we're talking about right now. And we talked about how that water is clean. Well, they engage in the Clean Water University, where they bring kids from predominantly 5th and 6th grade kids in to learn about things early, so they can generate the interest in the things that really are important. And really what we're talking about right now is figuratively and literally a river. And there's the water coming in and the water going out of our community. You're at the one end of the community, and WMC's at the other end of the community. And everything in between is a part of our our river, the river that we live on, the river that we live in. And getting kids to buy into that causes parents to buy into it. You know from experience that if the kids bring it home from school, the parents get to be a part of it too. So I'm excited about potentially, linking Clean Water University, which is talking about cleaning water, with the clean water that's coming in from upstream, and making it look the same coming out as it looks coming in. And that's the goal. We have a large metropolitan area right in between the discharge and the confluence. There are 250,000 people flushing toilets in between there. And it's the water that's coming in through the Springfield well fields or through the Mackenzie Hayden Bridge plant. But it all gets placed back into the river. So I'm excited about that concept, about how do we give kids ownership? Because if kids get ownership of it, then their parents have to have ownership of it too. So I think the future is wonderful there in terms of linking our educational opportunities for kids and making it a part of parents' educational opportunities. I'm kind of waxing right now because this is a new thought, but I think it seems really it seems to match. Water in, water out. How close can we make it look the same? Thank you for indulging my.
I've got a quick question, and it primarily leads to the Howard Buford Recreation Area and how it may play a role in the offset or of the costs for the management of these confluence lands. And that is, we've traditionally not had any camping at Howard Buford Recreation Area, and I don't know how compatible increased camping would be with the values of Howard Buford Recreation Area. So I don't want to say that I'm necessarily in favor of it, but what I am in favor of is your opinion, any or all of you, about whether there are some lands within either the confluence lands or the Howard Buford Recreation Area that would be compatible with our overall park strategy of trying, when appropriate, to have overnight camping revenue offset the costs of security, signage, and other things that all park visitors benefit from. Anyone want to take a shot on that?
Well, I think that if we do take ownership, we're going to need to master plan the site. To get the public feedback is going to be important. But just at first blush, I don't see these properties being compatible with camping.
Mm-hmm. Because of the easements that OWEB and BPA have, and because of the overall beauty, the overall natural habitat component of these lands. Okay.
The
All right.
marina's right out.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. Any
And
other questions?
Also another factor,
Oh.
like Joe mentioned, being in a floodplain, it's probably not a good idea to put infrastructure within a floodplain, and a campground does require electricity, dump stations, things like that.
Yeah, good point. And it seems that we are going to get increased flooding volume and intensity as a result of climate change and glaciation changes and everything else. Okay. Commissioner Burney.
Oh, all I was going to say was I felt bad that my schedule precluded the opportunity thus far to take a tour, but
Sometime.
Commissioner Buck sort of updated me, and so I'm really grateful to you for having made that in your schedule and given me some background for this discussion. Thank you.
I was going to also mention that the picture of Tom McCall up there, he was the graduation speaker the year I graduated from the University of Oregon. And, his vision of an improved Willamette River was a big feature of, that speech in 1973.
Oh, you're old.
Let's see, not compared to a tree, right? And the other thing I was going to mention is that for those of us that have had the opportunity to do a float, and I want to thank Mr. Orsinger in particular for that, but for anyone that's done that float and seen the revetments and seen the and now through the aerial photography that Mr. Bales, who by the way is my next door neighbor, the guy that took that picture up there, my next door neighbor. I'm very proud of that. But it seems to me that you do get this intense attachment, all these visitors to that area. And when they realize that there's even more to gently explore, I think it will be a fantastic thing for the entire metropolitan area, all of Eugene, all of Springfield, all of the suburban areas around the cities. I mean, and for that matter, the whole state, the whole county. So I'm very excited about that. And last but not least, for me, the opportunity to pull those invasive species, which I did spend an entire Saturday, and true, only one entire Saturday, not like the thousands of hours of volunteers that are put in there, but that really is a connection. When you get people out there through the Friends and through the Arboretum to do that volunteer work, even one time, it's a very, they really are tied to the land, and they're tied to the success of it. And I think as they maybe get along in their careers, they're willing to give to the organizations, the Mackenzie River Trust, to the Friends of Mount Pisgah, and to the Arboretum. So I do think there's a tremendous community buy-in for all of this. So, is there anything else you guys would like to say or ask? This was a discussion, a two-way discussion, so I want to give you that opportunity before we close.
Yeah, so we have tentatively scheduled a follow-up work session, and so, yes, should we continue with that follow-up work session?
Yes.
Would that be beneficial? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and have you and Mr. Hurley and Mr. Mokreisky talk with Ms. Jones about the scheduling of that? Is that done?
Yes.
Okay, all right, when is it?
It'll either be the 11th or 12th of June. That
11th or
is-
12th?
I have a time certain.
Okay, very good. All right, and so for those of you out there in television land that follow the board, we'll be holding another one of these work sessions, and it's good. Anything else from the commissioners? Okay, so we'll be in recess for about 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene to talk about our board retreat and our public comment questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
welcome back to our Board of Commissioners meeting. We have a couple of minor but very important items to go into. And one was our kind of direction yesterday to start working on some additional public comment sessions, ideally in the evening. And we kind of coalesced around the idea of the third Tuesday of each month. And reality, unfortunately, jumped in between our policy direction and what we could do, starting off with the Harris Hall is not available on the first of our many third Tuesdays, so.
We don't have eminent domain?
We don't have it. Apparently, we've made a deal with the city that gives it over to the city at 5 o'clock, so Ms. Jones can fill us in.
Yeah, so because Harris Hall, we haven't had a need, we reserve it from 8 to 5 on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, well, on Tuesdays for the board. And then at 5 o'clock, other groups can use it. We allow other groups to use it. And on June 18th, the city does have it reserved for a public hearing. So what I have done since our meeting yesterday is I've gone ahead and blocked Harris Hall out for the board on the third Tuesday of every month going forward, so we won't have, it won't be available for other entities to book, but we have to work through clearing that calendar first. So that was really our only conflict, was June 18th, and I can't really ask them to move because they've probably noticed that public hearing and all of those things. So that being said, I don't think we can have public comment on June 18th.
Could we do it at a different location?
Well, the only other place we can film in is here, in the BCC conference room, and there are some logistic issues with that. One being, the city will have a public comment period down in Harris Hall, so they'll have people coming in. It's after 5, and our doors are locked there. So getting the public up into this room after 5, it's not an impossible task, it's just a logistic task of opening up the building and having 2 public meetings going on and knowing who's where. So that, and given that it's your first one, I'm worried this room might not be big enough.
Given yesterday, I would agree, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I can't do the 19th either because the city also has Harris Hall booked up.
In the evening on the
Yes.
night.
Grannies to perform.
Okay, so can't do 18th, can't do 19th,
Right.
can't do 11th because of the LCOG
Right, because of the
schedule.
conflict of meetings.
So, Commissioner Farr.
You know, we also talk about moving our meetings out beyond downtown Eugene core. And, you know, other places that are available at expense, no doubt, is Springfield Library meeting room. Also the Bascom Tyson room in the Eugene Library, which is still downtown core. The Florence Benz Center. Now you're going to get smaller crowds, but you're going to get an opportunity to present to a different crowd. And Springfield Library is not that distant, and it's a pretty good sized room. That's where you've met there, Jay. That's where MWMC used to meet.
Now, I hesitate to have you do that on the 18th or 19th
Yeah.
because you will most likely be in Harris Hall until 5. You have very full board days on that day. So it would be easy if you could just do that.
On the 18th and 19th of June, we have a full board day.
The 18th, yeah,
Yeah, it's our,
because we took the 25th down, we only have 2 board weeks in June, and that's June 11th and June 18th, and they're heavily booked.
We'll probably have June 12th too. Mr. Henry
You
just
will have-
commented on that.
Yeah, you will have June 12th. That's
I
consent.
can
all-
already tell that area is gonna be full. There's gonna be, I can just,
Right.
so many things are starting to, I hear June 10th, June 11th, June 12th.
Right, I sent all of you an email a while ago asking you to please make sure you keep your calendars open for those 4 days, because I guarantee you will have Tuesday, Wednesday meetings on those days, so.
Commissioner Burney.
So, there must be something wrong with how I'm thinking. This doesn't seem like that big of a deal. So why couldn't we just go from 5 o'clock adjourn at Harris Hall, trot on over to the Springfield Library, and have this session? I just think, and the reason I say that, I'm not arguing it, I'm just saying,
Right.
the reason I say that is because I think that this Board of Commissioners needs to demonstrate an openness to communicate fairly soon after yesterday. There was a lot of frustration, and I just think it's an important symbolic thing that we do. So I don't want to push it out and have a
And-
community perception that we're very distant and not caring. That's all.
And you could. I can definitely check to see if Springfield Library is available. I can't say yes or no.
Or
because-
Bascom and Tyson, which is a less of a joint for that one.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
whatever, yeah.
Yep.
Right,
Well,
again, we have camera issues, and Bascom Tyson, I believe, has cameras.
It
in
does, yeah.
But we also have television crews filming the Eugene meeting
Right.
on the 18th. So we just get into some conflicts. I'm actually looking to you for direction. Tell me what to do, how you'd like me to proceed for the 18th.
Mr. Mokrohysky?
Well, that was gonna be my only comment is would just, if you want it to be filmed, I mean, it doesn't have to be filmed. We can do another record, we could do an audio recording. It's sort of just, I think the board does need to decide how do you wanna set these up. So there's, I don't have an answer for you, I'm just trying to think through this. It's helpful to know, like, you wanna do something sooner rather than later, immediately. I think it'll be easier to sort of once we get a few months out, we can schedule them out.
Right.
Already
And then we
done.
can have it on
Done,
the
yeah.
books.
Yeah.
So that's done. It's just figuring out how do we do some things.
Just for the
over the
first
next few
couple,
months.
yeah, the first June and July are
Yeah.
our two conflicts that
And
we
one
get
thing to
into.
think about would be, I don't know where a lot of these folks yesterday came from, if there are pockets of the county that if it was a
They
lot of
seem
folks
from
sort of-
all over.
Yeah, maybe it is.
I
And
might
what
suggest that we try the Springfield Library meeting room, which the Springfield City Council meets in for their work sessions. We've had a lot of JEO meetings there. We've had MPC meetings there, and it's just a very large space, so they can handle a large number of people. The LCOG people are used to filming there, so their setup is easier. If we set it for 5:30 on June 18, that will give us the time to get from Harris Hall, which we're obligated to be out of at 5 o'clock, no matter what. It allows us then to have a recess to get to Springfield by 5:30 and hold a,
I'll call Metro.
well, we don't know if they're available, right?
Well, they will be filming the Eugene meeting, so.
Yeah.
we
Whether
do
they've
know-
got two crews available.
Yeah,
Right, and
yeah.
but I don't know what they have in the evenings.
Right,
because-
right. So that's why we're having this discussion, so that
So I'll check
if,
with
if,
LCOG and I'll
if the
check.
board was interested in doing it sooner than later, and the sooner was June 18, then we can talk about the Bascom Tyson Room of the Eugene Public Library. We can talk about the Springfield Public Library meeting room as being two likely spots if there's LCOG filming available. If not, why not just do a tape recording? And that way we can start with the third Tuesday, and we can just say, our hope is for every third Tuesday, not involving a down week. Please watch our website, and then we start off with it. And when people come in on the 11th or 12th, if we have it on the 12th as well as the 11th, when they come in, we'll tell them we are launching our third Tuesday
Right.
program.
Right, so I will check into both those rooms and check with Metro, and if I can get it set up, you will get a calendar invite, and I will get it on the public calendar. If I cannot, I will need to seek alternate direction
Yep,
beyond what we've
sure.
already got, but our next board meeting isn't until June 11th, so
Right,
that's.
that's why this was important to
Right.
do today.
Right, so
Any
I will-
any other comments from commissioners on this basic plan? Yes,
So,
Commissioner.
one, I want to just comment that almost everybody that spoke yesterday has spoken at multiple 9 o'clock public comment sessions. I've seen their name on the sign-up sheet, read their name for public comment multiple times. Just to be clear, that has not been a barrier in the past. So, just, the same frequent flyers, I've seen over and over again from, and I won't go into names, but I think you could probably very easily go through the public comment list for the last 2 years and find almost everyone that spoke on there 5 to 6 times over the last 2 years. You know, I understand Metro TV is really 2 people. So we have an all-day board meeting, and Eugene has an evening board, public hearing. Asking them to then cover a 3rd meeting outside of that on that day, I think is going to be near impossible for them without them doing some kind of weird overtime or something like that. So, you know, my guess is logistically, it's not going to be possible for Metro TV. It seems like, you know, we've had the request to do evening meetings. We just can't move fast enough to deal with it in June. Let's see if we can find something in July. I've noticed that this doesn't start till the August.
Well, that's because the 3rd Tuesday in July is a down week.
Is it
So
down week?
It's a down week. It is July 16th.
So could we
and
do
it's a
this,
down week.
is there a reason we couldn't do the 4th Tuesday in July? just
No,
so
we
can
could do
get
the
started?
2nd or the 4th. Well, the
Yeah.
2nd will not.
The
work for
2nd because
Commissioner
of
Buck.
LCOG, that's
Right.
what I'm saying. Is there a different day in July we could do?
Either
Yeah.
either the 4th or the 2nd, depending on schedules for you, would work. It was just the 16th will not work. It's a down week.
Yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
I'm sorry, you're saying.
And there's 5 Tuesdays in July, so it's
Right.
one of those weird months. So,
Right.
so if we did July 23rd as our first evening board meeting, I don't think there's anything else on that 4th Tuesday. But if that would work. You know,
So we
so-
could start it on the 4th Tuesday. Would that be in June as well, or there is?
No, the 4th week of June is June 25th.
We're down.
And we're down
Yeah.
because lots of you are.
Well, what about, this is just an idea to start this out. We're meeting on the 11th. We are not going to do an evening because of the conflict with LCOG.
Correct.
We are meeting on the 18th. We believe that there's a public space available, not Harris Hall, but a public space available. Why don't we just do a tape recording of the public comment on the 18th
Right.
at 5:30? And that way, we don't have to contact LCOG. We take no action. We hear public comment in Springfield, a different location, and we try that out. And then the next month, by the 18th of June, we announce the next public comment, which will be on the 4th Tuesday, not the 3rd, because that is July 23.
Right, and I'll have them all on the countywide calendars and they'll show on your agenda.
So we'll try to go back and forth between the 3rd and 4th, depending on our down week schedule, and if that doesn't work, we'll go to the 2nd, or the 1st.
We're always going to have conflicts.
Yeah,
for the
we're always
third-
going to have conflicts.
Third week.
Right, my issue was just getting it started. The
right.
first 2 months,
Right.
we
Very
were
good.
kind of,
Right.
Okay.
we had issues.
Yeah.
So
I
do we
will-
have enough agreement now to move forward with Springfield on the,
If it's available.
if it's available?
And if it's not, you want me to check Bascom Tyson,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And-
there's also 2 or 3 locations in Springfield. There's the sub-meeting room, there's the Springfield City Hall,
There's the
council
jail.
chambers.
Does LTD have a facility?
LTD has a facility.
Little
The
common-
city of Springfield has their meeting,
LTD's is a little tougher.
public service, public safety building where the Metro MPC meets. So there's at least 4 public facilities in Springfield that we could use, and we'll use a tape recorder. That'll lower the cost, it'll lower the logistical problems with LCOG.
And
So
just for clarity too, I
Yep.
will confirm that Eugene actually is planning on using
Okay.
the room, Harris Hall, because that would be our simplest
Yep.
option.
Can I
The-
make one
the
more
18th of
suggestion? I really feel 5 o'clock is too early of a start time.
Yep,
We got flack when we started at 5:30 the last time we had an evening public comment session. Several of the people commented that it was very difficult to get off of work at 5 and get to Harris Hall and park by 5:30.
Okay.
We start at 5, we're going to hear even more flack about that.
Okay.
They won't consider it an evening meeting.
okay.
So
How about 6?
I would suggest that we look at these as from 5:30 to 7 rather than from 5 to 6:30,
That's fine.
just as to avoid that criticism.
Right.
I just throw out 5 for staff's sake.
Yeah, I realize that, but it's just one of those things where it's gonna, I don't know how much staff has to be here if it's a purely public comment session.
Yes,
So
sir.
I really agree with both of you guys. I really agree with Jay in that why give people a cause to make a non-issue an issue, right? And I really agree on the same principle with Pete when we do something on the 18th to demonstrate, right, that we're here and we want to be responsive, because why give groups of people a non-issue to make an issue out of? I would also request, do we have any way, once you get the logistics down and it gets set, do we have any way to let some of the people that came, that keep coming, Jay, and who knows, we might get more frequent flyers at night, because night's when they can fly.
Yeah.
But do we have a way to let them know, so that just out of consideration for them, they don't show up on other mornings, only to have the same experience that left a distaste in their mouth, especially now that we're setting time to really provide that opportunity?
I believe that'll become, as we
Will that
move
just-
into
they'll
this,
just-
this'll
people will just learn
and
that?
it will
Okay.
be, I will notice on the countywide calendar every third Thursday when we have these, that this is happening. It'll be sent out in our public meetings notice. It'll be put everywhere we can put it, and I'm assuming you guys will keep saying it at the board meeting, the third Tuesday of
And I
every month
presume
at
that is
5:30.
the information by which people learned to come anyway, so
Well, one of the emails you
Yeah.
got from member.
that I
complaining
forwarded
about-
to you,
Yeah, and all the commissioners, I think, got that, and Devin provided a
Yeah,
response. And
yeah.
copied everyone on that. That individual is on our listserv. You can sign up on the website to be
Okay.
notified anytime any meeting is published.
Right.
A
Good,
number of
so
those
it's done.
folks, I think, are
Okay.
already on that
Yes.
listserv.
good.
And then you can, commissioners should point people to that if they want
Right.
to know when meetings are happening, go sign up for the listserv, and then you get,
Yeah, on the
Or the
bottom
email
right hand,
blast,
on
whatever
the
it's
bottom right hand corner of every page of our website is a thing that says sign up for notifications.
Perfect.
And it takes you to a page that lists about 8 things you can sign up for. One is Board of Commissioners meetings, one is the meetings notice, which will include all of the meetings in addition to the Board of Commissioners
Can't be
meetings.
more transparent than that,
So-
okay.
Okay, Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is wonderful, thank you for,
You're welcome.
I mean, I threw this out late yesterday, everybody seemed to be wanting to talk about it, so we have this, but I'm glad we're talking about it today and getting it ironed out. Because my goal isn't to have the people who've already been able to find their way down here, making it easy, I'll certainly making it easier for them to find their way down there, but they find their way down here. My goal is to open it up to more people who historically have not
Right.
shown up. And those people quite often are folks who have a 9 to 5 quote job, or they run a business, or whatever it may be, and they simply don't have, it's impossible to get morning time. And the other part about that, and this is a good time for us to talk about this, is the intimidation factor that some people feel when there are public demonstrations of support. We witnessed that in the Eugene City Council for years and years and years. So I was there the night that Kitty Pearson said, instead of cheering or clapping, do this.
Even that's
I was-
intimidating.
That is intimidating to people who have a different opinion.
Everybody understands that's the same thing as clapping.
And it's a visually intimidating thing. Now, however you may feel about that, picture yourself as somebody who is maybe 1 out of, or 5 out of 30 people in the room who have a differing opinion, who do represent a certain cross-section of the population. In some cases, maybe a much larger cross-section of the population, but their voices are quieted. And they are actually quieted by the fact that they feel that they're going to be harassed one way or another if they speak. And I have testimony on that, and it goes both ways. When the pro-Second Amendment rights people were here, people who wanted to talk against it felt intimidated and they didn't raise their voice. So whomever it may be, if there is a physical presence of the people who have a different opinion, we need to make it as welcoming, comforting, and easy to testify as possible.
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had people come to me, after I'd gone, called out names and folks, didn't reply or come up to the podium afterwards. They came to me and said, I didn't come up because I didn't feel comfortable. Because my opinion was a minority opinion, obviously a minority opinion. So, and that happened when we went out there to Elmira when we were looking at the policing district, and the crowd was so anti-tax, and the folks that wanted to speak in support just didn't respond when I called their name because they were afraid to.
Yeah.
And that's happened in other situations, and I think we heard a couple of people not respond yesterday, that
Yeah,
may have been intimidated by that. You know, and particularly that, well, everyone agrees with me, stand up, that should not be, that sort of thing, this sort of thing, it's all about, you know, let me show you that everyone here agrees with me, and if you don't, you gotta, you know,
Yeah.
this is who you're speaking against, you know?
Maybe as a follow-up to this discussion, Steve, you can give some thought to talking with legal counsel, but also Ms. Ashbridge, about some kind of elaboration of our rules of
Rules of decorum.
propriety, decorum, so that these rules can be kind of listed for people, because we are seeing more and more of the demonstration type of activity, which leads to this, view that we aren't interested in everybody's view, which, of course, the whole purpose of it is to allow people this very special opportunity, which is to speak to their elected officials directly. They don't have that opportunity with Congress very often, certainly not with the governor, certainly not with the other state elected officials. Most state legislators do not have to face anything comparable to public comment. So it's something that people don't have the opportunity to go to very many other places for this. And, sometimes if we can be more open with where we go, maybe that's a way to have some rules and have a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that's
We do have
available.
that.
We do have that.
We do have that.
Okay.
And we actually, didn't
Can
we
you-
adopt them in the first meeting of the year?
Well,
The
we have
first
that
meeting-
rule, yeah.
the first meeting of every year, actually, we do it, we adopt the rules of decorum, and there is a section in there that, in that board order that says what, that waving of fingers, signs, clapping,
Yeah.
standing are not allowed.
Yeah.
So we can easily pull that page from that board order and have it sitting with you as the chair and have it on the back table.
And I think you saw yesterday too in the meeting where one of the commenters didn't want to observe the 2-minute rule. And how rude people can be. And so if we don't enforce these rules evenly for everybody, then we'll have the potential for, and at one point, one of the commenters stood up and said, I want to cede my time to this guy, well, that's not allowed, and even jumping up and saying that isn't allowed. And so, to me, we have to make sure we just apply these rules. So I think a one-page summary of the decorum rules would be helpful, not only for the audience, but for the commissioners and the staff that's there, so that they understand what to do in these instances. And I agree that if we have, incursions on these rules, then we're gonna get into chaos. And by the way, I told this to Steve the other day, that the Board of Commissioners used to have a talk-back policy during public comment, so that when people would give their 3 minutes, then the board would be able to respond to each person. And we gravitated to the current system precisely to allow people to get their view out and not be having the meeting delayed by the back and forth, which often would go into several hours and really throw the whole schedule off for the staff. And just, so, yeah, I personally think that our current system, which is extremely frustrating, you're sitting there, right, and people are just, they're commenting, and you get your, 2 minutes at the end. Well, pretty frustrating, yeah.
I just want to offer kind of one of my reflections on this structure, because this has come up a few times. You hear people say you need to have your meetings at night, and I think what you're gravitating to makes a lot of sense, to have this once a month thing. But just as maybe this is only beneficial to the newer commissioners, but you're full-time commissioners, right? And so largely the reason that your meetings are at 9 a.m. these are business meetings of the board. I mean, that's how it's structured. There's a lot of things, a lot of the work is generated by staff that's bringing things forward to the board for approval or discussion on things. But these are really intended to be your business meetings where you're talking about issues, taking action on things, giving direction where you need to. What's happened is, as there's more of a desire for public comment, you're mixing, you have this conflict because you've mixed a business meeting with a public comment session. So one thing to think about would be, if, I think would help the meetings probably go a little bit, it'd be more predictable, if you have these monthly public comment sessions that are really intended to be these longer outlets for the public to come and then for the board to respond. And that will generate additional work likely, because you're gonna ask for work sessions and additional follow-up information and things. Maybe consider, maybe you won't have to do this because a lot of those folks will go to the evening things, but consider, I think the city council or some city councils do this where they say, we're gonna take 30 minutes of public comment. When 30 minutes is up, we're gonna move on to our business.
Yeah. The other
Because you
thing,
do have that other, I'm not saying you have to do that, but maybe it's something to consider because you've got this other outlet now to say, listen, we've listened to you, we've heard you, and you can come in the evening and speak to us.
Yeah.
the other thing a lot of, boards do is they only allow public comment on items that are on the agenda that day. And I think that might be maybe the days we're gonna have an evening meeting where it's open public comment about everything. Maybe say we're gonna limit public comment to 20 minutes in the morning, and it's only comment specific to an item on the agenda. So, because there are people that wanna speak before we actually take action. So if we're gonna have a business, I don't wanna eliminate public comment prior to our meetings, but it might be good if we're gonna provide these open public comment sessions where they can go talk to us about policy and things that aren't on the agenda that day, which almost everything that we heard yesterday had nothing to do with the current agenda, And that but there were some people there to speak to something that was on our agenda, and they had to leave because they couldn't stay forever, and they drove from Florence. So prioritizing, somehow or another, on those days, we're gonna have evening public comments restricted to items on the agenda in the morning might help that, shorten that public comment for our
Commissioner
business
Buck?
meetings.
I would find that a little bit challenging, only because that would only give people one day a month, and that's if
Well,
we're
I'm not saying don't do
that.
that on the days we're not having the evening session.
Only on that day.
Only on that day restricted to agenda items.
I'll let Commissioner Buck enforce that rule. 25 people come in, want to talk about something. Oh,
It will
no,
be
you can't talk.
challenging, But in relation to people that travel really far, I have seen in groups where when people sign up, they say whether they're out of town, and we take the out of area or those that are more than X amount of miles away first on public comment, and then you can go with those that are more local to accommodate people that have traveled really far. And if we don't get to that, then they're incredibly upset. I would throw that out there to see what people think about that. They may not be the first one that signed up, so, but I would like to give some kind of accommodation in people, especially in rural areas that have traveled really far and don't often come, to have some kind of time priority in order for them to speak.
Commissioner Farr?
Having 10 years with the Eugene City Council, which is one of the most public comment intense environments you will ever witness, we learn things. For a while, the council had a rule where you couldn't talk about something that was on the agenda. And then, they've experimented with rules like you can only testify once a month. We can really do anything we wish that makes it easier for people to feel comfortable testifying. One thing that we could do is, have you testified in the last 30 days? If so, people who haven't move ahead of you on the queue. Thanks. Now, I'm going to talk about the first time I witnessed a Lane County Commission meeting was in 1992. I came, and Jack Roberts had my seat. But it was a joint meeting with the Eugene City Council and the Lane County Commission, but it was a public hearing, and it was to hear Jerry's petition to expand the urban growth boundary by a little tiny bit to go where they are today. And the Jerry's people were there in force, wearing uniforms, which we can't say don't wear a t-shirt, you know. And we went there and I saw everybody laid back and Sean Bowles was there and Kevin Hornbuckle was there and they were all, oh boy, what's this gonna be? We had 2 people testify. I think it was powerful. 2 people testified with 40 people in the room. And so if there were a class on how to make your testimony more effective, understanding that if you're saying the same thing that somebody just said, you know, it may not be heard as clearly as if you're saying something different, or if you have a group of people with one set of powerful testimony where you don't say, I cede my time. What people do is they hand a baton off. My time's up, your turn. You just take turns with the same testimony. There are ways to present public testimony, and I don't know that we want to restrict how people can present it, but telling people how to do it more effectively, where it's going to be heard, is good. But really, it was an evening meeting. We came out in force, and it was very beautifully listened to by both the board and the city council.
Okay, Commissioner Burney, Mr. Mokohiski.
Here's what I hear so far. I hear that on days when this is like I'm checking to see if I'm hearing correctly. On days where we're not going to have this once a month evening meeting, we're going to limit public testimony to 30 minutes. I'm not saying we're going to do this, but that's a thought. And then another thought is on days where we are having the evening public testimony meeting, we could limit testimony on that morning to the agendas on the items on the agenda. And I'm hearing, as long as this is doable, it makes sense to me. I'm hearing that at least if people know in advance at a certain point, if you're more than 30 miles away or whatever it is, and you sign up by this time, we'll hear you first as an accommodation. So far, none of those seem all that controversial to me. They all sound good. That's all I was gonna say.
I'll just make this point before I call on Mr. Mokohiski. The grocery stores are now getting into the business of shopping for people, and you just drive up and get the food. I've done this a few times myself, and it really works well. And you have to get on a computer and sign up, and then they tell you when to come and get your groceries. We could do a sign up, ahead of time, and then we could say, we're going to allocate, 40 minutes. Our average is probably under 40 minutes, but we could do 40 minutes, and that way we have slots lined up, and people can sign up for them. And if they want to come from, the far reaches of Lane County, and they want to make sure that they want to get their slot, they can do that. For the people that are routine, we can put a limit on, no more than twice a month or whatever. We can make a reasonable limit and try that out to see if we can incorporate the idea of openness, but also some degree of efficiency. And even in the worst case scenario yesterday, where there were multiple, different factions coming in, apparently not coordinating much with each other, but they just showed up en masse, and we don't have any control over that currently. And we could put limits on time, and there was a reference to our 10, our former 20-minute rule, which we took off a few months ago. So we just might have to experiment with this. But Steve, you were going to say something.
Just Judy shared an idea that I think has some merit. We have an Equity and Access Advisory Board, and I don't think you'd want to wait for this to do your meetings, but if a lot of what you're talking about is how do we create an equal playing field for everyone to be able to come and be respected, and based on the different backgrounds and places that they live and everything. So it may be worth posing that question to the Equity and Access Board to say, here's what the board's thinking, we wanna be respectful to people that are coming, and do you have any insight into how we can structure this in a way that's fair and equitable for everybody?
Yeah, because the first thing I thought of when you talked about computer signups is I've got a heavy senior community in Florence that some of them don't ever get on the internet.
Yeah.
It also gets to the issue of how do we think about accepting public comment from people that aren't coming to the meetings, they can't come because they have other obligations, they might be intimidated to come for one reason or another, or just not comfortable to come to that forum. Those are still people that you wanna hear from.
Yep.
So we kinda set up this one way, not everyone's comfortable getting, I mean, it's an intimidating thing to stand up at a microphone in front of cameras and,
Yeah.
and
We
five
do
people
have
sitting
the
up on this
email the
thing
entire
staring down
board,
at you.
but-
So I think they're probably, anyways, you don't need to tackle that today, but I think
Yeah.
that discussion about how do we find other ways in addition to this public comment forum to engage people and get feedback.
That's a great idea. That board is a very deep thinking board. I attend their meetings and I get to listen. They really are.
So another thing to consider in the cycle of these meetings, these third and fourth and second, not second or third, is it second?
Second's alcohol.
Second, in the first, third, and fourth Tuesday schedule, if we agreed to do the first one in Springfield, and wasn't it 6 o'clock?
I think Jay
5:30.
said 5:30.
Yeah.
5:30, okay, 5:30 at Springfield, either sub-library, city council, chambers. Those are the three that I'm aware of locations. So that's done. What I want to talk about is the rotation. In other words, I agree that we should really rotate these around by location. So that if the first time out it's Springfield, maybe the second time out it's Veneta, or if it's able to be arranged because of distance, Florence, certainly Cottage Grove would be on that list. And in my case, I'd like to suggest some other public location in my district other than here, say Amazon Community Center. I'm sure Commissioner Farr has the same kind of issue where just because it's at the Lane County Courthouse doesn't mean it's gonna be available to people who live in, say, Bethel, as an
Bethel
example.
doesn't count.
See, I think I put Bethel first is a pretty good campaign slogan, but I'm not running out there. But anyway, that to me is a part of this. This accessibility is also changing the location. And the time is one thing, the location's another thing. And I think that when we get talking about the next one beyond the 18th, we ought to be thinking about either your district or your district, and then we'll come back into the metro, either Commissioner Farr's district or my district, and then we'll go back out of the metro. So that we kind of mix it up a little bit.
And I will just remind you that, I mean, if we want to do that audio recording, that's a possibility, but if not, if you want to film that, that actually carries a cost
Yeah.
for us to bring back.
Well, that's why we want to do the audio without,
Right.
further direction.
And additionally, if Harris Hall is a bit easy, I'm just giving
Yep.
you all
Yep.
the options. I'm happy to do the other rooms
Mhm.
as they come up. But it does require that your staff be available to actually get out to where you're meeting and have those.
Yep,
So in that case, you'd have to have a staff member go out to Cottage Grove or to Florence to get you set up for a meeting, whereas Harris Hall, we're ready to go.
yep, yep, agreed.
Oh, you mentioned maybe the next one being Commissioner Bozovich's district, so I was just gonna suggest that we have our next one at the Country Fair for their 50th anniversary.
I'm more of an
They'll already have
August,
KLCC
I'm more of an
crews there
August
to take-
Florence. I like August in Florence. That's my big one. Okay, so we hammered this to death. Are we done with this
Well,
now?
can I just kind of
A little more
just
hammering.
recap what I've heard too? So I will check with Springfield Meeting Room and other rooms and try to get something set up for June 18th at 5:30. you did decide on July 23rd, which is the fourth Thursday, correct?
Yep.
For your meeting
Yeah.
in
Yep.
July. And then the meetings after that, on the handout I gave all of you, we have one scheduled already here for August. The September meeting is a down week.
So can we do the fourth Tuesday?
So I guess that's the question I'm asking. On down weeks, do you want me to go to the fourth Tuesday if I can?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'll,
Well, either first or fourth.
yeah, I'm trying to maybe have something that the public can say this is what they do if
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is down. But
Yep.
November is another a problem because we have ALC and then we have Thanksgiving, so I can't do the third or the fourth week there.
I think.
And if I do the first, we're looking at pretty
Yeah.
close back-to-back public meetings, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know what your meeting conflicts are, so I'm just looking for kind of routine direction. Should I just automatically try the fourth Wednesday if I can do it, and if not,
I'd say,
Yeah.
third,
Yeah.
third, if that's not available. Fourth, if that's not available. First,
Fifth.
yeah, not fifth.
okay.
I think that's gonna start getting confusing for people,
Okay,
if we are switching between the third and fourth, and
Okay.
people won't know which one it is because they don't follow our down weeks.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm concerned about
How'd you like to do it?
flipping back and forth. You know, I very much like the idea of having a meeting once a month, but I think there's just gonna be months where we won't do
Do
one.
it, yeah.
You know, and then in the beginning, I can understand flipping it for June and July just to get it started, but I think once we set a permanent place and time, that's when it's gonna be most effective for people to come. Otherwise, if we do too much switching around, we're just not gonna get very many people there. So, you know, I guess I'm just not in favor of doing too much switching.
I would add that it does make it easier for staff, the front desk. We do get calls about when can you have public comment. If we have a standard answer that
Consistent.
we do this on the third Tuesday of every month, you know, if we have to say we do it on the third Tuesday of every month, except when we're busy, then maybe the fourth, maybe the first, and it does get confusing for the staff that has to take those calls, but.
You could say
And-
check for down weeks.
One of the things I was talking to Commissioner Buck earlier about is I do set the next year agenda in kind of October of the year before. So you will see on the sheet I gave you that I currently have a meeting scheduled for the first, second, third, and fourth month in 2020. So we can be a little more sensitive to down weeks in 2020 and try maybe not to make them on the third Tuesday. It's just going to take some time
Right.
for all of it to settle down so that we have that day available.
Gonna always run into problems in
Yeah, we will,
November.
but once we, if we have an option, we maybe don't take the third down, we take the second down.
If we
instead.
do if we don't rotate, okay, we don't rotate locations, you're right, we will have people that will not find, if we rotate, we'll have people. On the other hand, when the board has met, and not for many, many years, but when the board did meet in Florence or in Cottage Grove or Cresswell or Coburg or other communities, we would typically have a very large turnout because we would notice it 6 weeks in advance. And so those turnouts were quite, and they weren't the usual people that would normally come. They would not, those people would not go to Coburg. They would not go to Florence. And so it did give an opportunity for people that we would not ever see throughout the rest of the year. So, yes, sir.
I concur with Heather's suggestion. It would seem that it would be a simple matter of identifying third Tuesday except for these months.
Yep,
Not even asking people to look at our down schedule, just saying which
Correct.
month.
yep.
So if we did that, what I should be able to tell, I was trying to, Diana, I'm sorry, but what months would we not have that public input if we were to?
Well, I have that, so for 2020,
Well, I was just looking at 19.
At 19, you can see the 3 days that I have there listed already.
They are the 3rd?
Those are the third Tuesdays of
Okay.
those months. If, for example, you'll see that September's missing and
And
November's
November,
missing.
yeah.
And that is because we have down weeks those
Right,
weeks.
right.
Yes.
Okay,
That's probably always going to be the case for November.
right.
But like I said, as we start planning 2020, I can be sensitive to those weeks. And so right now, your calendars, I've sent you all calendar invitations, and I have canceled the dates that were down. But 2020 will show a meeting at the third Tuesday of every month. And once I set that calendar, I'll change those calendars as well.
So June 18, August 20, September 15, December 17, these are all third.
Those are all third
Okay.
Tuesdays.
So the only one not on here would be June 18.
Well, June and July are both missing, you'll see.
Why is June missing? You just said June was.
June 18th, because you guys
This
just
June.
told me.
Oh, okay,
try to
right,
fill it.
okay,
And
gotcha.
July, because we're down.
So if we just said, we're gonna do it on the third Tuesday, when we're meeting on a Tuesday.
Right.
Then this is our schedule, then we'll do one on June 18, one on August 20, one on September 15. It looks like it comes out to about once every 2 months.
For the rest of 2019,
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
for 2020, we can be sensitive to
Yeah,
that and make it a
okay.
little more.
Yeah.
So,
That sounds good.
so should I schedule the July 23rd one for the 4th? I mean, just to get us through the next 2 months? To have the
I
one
thought we were going to just stick to one meeting on the third Tuesday.
Right, I
for
thought I heard
consistency.
Commissioner Buck say, though, for June and July, we would just kind of,
Oh,
To
okay.
get it started if
Yeah.
you
Okay.
wanted, and we
All
already
right.
gave her guidance and to look for some other
So
locations.
when would the July one be if it wasn't the third Tuesday?
I believe we discussed July 23rd, which is
Right.
the
Okay,
4th
okay.
Tuesday.
So June 18, July 23, August 20, and then
we
the
get on the
rest,
schedule.
then the rest. But then would there be a September one too, or not?
September, the third Tuesday in September, we are down.
Okay, so
So,
we
no,
wouldn't
there would
meet in
not be.
September.
No.
Gotcha, okay.
And again, I will, once we have this all firmed up, this will go on the county-wide calendar with where the rooms, where the locations are. If we don't kind of set the meeting rooms in advance, it gets a
Right.
little confusing for the public too, because they might,
Right.
because I'll have a TBD up there until we confirm a room
Yeah.
location. So if someone really does want to come to a meeting and they find out it's in Florence that month, so if we're gonna go, right now I've got it all at Harris Hall.
All right,
If we're gonna
except
go-
for June 18.
Right, if we're gonna go the route of moving it to different locations, I would highly recommend we figure those out for the year in advance.
Yeah, yeah.
So that the public
Okay.
knows.
Yes, sir.
If we're gonna, I'm just gonna continue on, if we're going to go that route, I recommend it not be every month, but every second or third meeting that we have, be that rotation, just make life easier. And also, I had a question, and that is if we, it sounded to me like the board thought Judy's idea was a really good idea, about bouncing off. When could we hear something back to inform our decisions?
So, well, their next meeting is June 19th, that Wednesday. But we
Of course
could-
it is.
I know, and then they're not meeting in July because of the holiday. But we could certainly get the message out before and have that discussion at the 19th.
Great, thank you.
meeting And bring it back as soon as we can.
Okay, so I think we've got some consensus there and
Yes.
some direction.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. The other thing was the board retreat. So what's the update on that?
So I think we talked about 3 possible dates at the board meeting yesterday. I think the
I'd vote
idea
for
was
Hawaii.
as soon as we could do this, June, July, that would be wonderful, but scheduling wise, it just didn't work, just because we're hoping to spend a good amount of time, maybe 9 to 2 or 9 to 3-ish. And we've found that we've really wanted to try and get some other work sessions in on some of these Wednesdays, so to accommodate schedules. So it really looks like August 28th was one option. And I feel strongly that the second option, September 11th, even though it's pushing it out there a little bit more, we might get more schools back in session and confirming more availability, if we open up some of that retreat to department directors and having a more robust conversation. So it's looking like September 11th. I did put a hold on your calendars to see if we can confirm that that's a good date.
We talked
Okay.
about like 3 hours with just the commissioners and whatever key staff would need to be there to help support you. And then and then lunch, and then a couple hours with the larger executive team of appointed and elected directors and a few other staff.
Okay.
So we wanted a good chunk of time where it's really just the 5 of you and a facilitator. We're gonna bring on a facilitator
Okay.
to do that.
And I don't see evening meeting on either of those, the day ahead of those meetings.
I believe,
Right.
hearing your discussion in September, that was a down week, the third Tuesday, so
Yep.
there isn't going to be one.
Mhm.
So that might be just better timing to
Okay.
fresh.
Very good. Okay, well, let's just all communicate with Ms. Jones and Ms. Williams to make sure that we get the best date of those two.
So if I may, whenever, I'm not sure with new commissioners if we've ever made this very clear, when you see an email coming in from Lane County Agenda Review, that's usually a calendar request, a Lane County Agenda Review. Judy and I both monitor those emails, so we have found the best way to get confirmation is we'll put a tentative on a meeting date, so you should now have one for September 11th. And
Already
we'll
accepted
just,
that.
you what?
Already accepted that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've seen
You make me
acceptances
look bad.
already. And we monitor those, and once we get the full 5 of you done, we actually will change the tentative to a confirmed and move forward and things like that. So whenever you do see that, just know you are communicating with Judy and I when Lane County Agenda Review sends you something.
Me
It's
too.
just a box we can both monitor.
Okay, anything further? I don't see anything else, so we do have our Homes for Good board meeting later today at 1:30 at the Springfield Utility Board. And then our next Board of Commissioners meeting will be on June 11. I know there's a legislative meeting this Friday at 8 a.m. I'm sure there's plenty of other committee meetings as well. So, okay, go forth. We are adjourned.